All right, good evening, everyone. This is like the billionth time I've tried to record this, so if it sounds awkward, then whatever. But good evening to those of you who are in ERE, the class that I am taking. If you are not currently in ERE and you are actually one of the students who have found my YouTube page, probably the time to tune out. This will not be very interesting. I still love you. See you in January. But I did my methodology presentation on the impact that culturally relevant science lessons can have on students of color. And I found in my literature review that a lot of students actually have kind of some negative attitudes towards science, not really that positive, but many of those students want to go into science-related fields. And so one of the reasons that they think this is because that some teachers don't really know how to teach urban students and that students don't really identify with school science. So I found a little bit more, but I don't know that we'll have time to go through it all. But basically, when students are involved in something and interested, they obviously take more of an interest in it and pay more attention. When you relate it to culture, they have more familiarity and kind of perform better than they would with other tasks. A lot of the other things that I found were that context and working with other people and engaging in discussion actually helps students learn more. So that was a little bit about the lit review. More of the methodology stuff. Obviously, the question that I wanted to answer was how do these culturally relevant lessons impact the engagement of middle school students of color in science classes? And the way that I decided to do that was by kind of selecting a sample of my students. And that sample kind of reflects the demographics of my school, which is Gaston. And so this was done by a collection of informal interviews. And the interviews were based off of some open-ended questions that had been created prior to that, and they were transcribed and kind of taking notes on it. The students were responding to the interview questions, and the interview questions were about the lesson that they had already done. So we interpreted the responses based on how they responded to the culturally relevant lessons. My sample was students at my school, so Gaston Middle School, ages 13 to 14, whether or not they were enrolled in the science course, which would be my science course, and they roughly represented the school's ethnic groups, so kind of half African American, half Hispanic, and then a little bit of Hmong. So that's more for my school. Not every school is going to be like that, but. And then my data collection plan, all the materials that I had was really an audio recorder, well, would have had, was an audio recorder, kind of interview notes, questions that I wanted to ask, and a safe environment. So the way the interview process happened was that kind of get the environment ready, no one else is in there. And then once that happened, we would kind of go over what would be asked, talk about the questions, and they would respond to them, and that would be kind of audio recorded and transcribed, and then repeated through the quarter. So I made it an interview because I thought that would tell me a lot more about what the students were thinking than just like a yes or no kind of type question. So the way these were analyzed, it's a little bit tricky, and I found that it was a little bit harder to analyze, but the interviews are interpreted based off of how they responded to the following questions, so the questions in the table. So the analysis is focused on whatever the students are reporting that they feel. So we're mainly looking at like how engaged students are with the lesson, how much they participated, and like remembered the information. So even though the questions don't like specifically ask about culture, because I didn't want to immediately kind of like throw them off, they go over things that reflect back on aspects of a culturally relevant lesson. So they should be able to tell that it's different than other lessons because they probably don't have much experience with culturally relevant lessons. They talk about what they enjoyed about the lesson, kind of what about the lesson was interesting to you. So mainly we're looking at if there are like common responses or like things in common that they're saying or stuff like that. And yeah, there's my works cited if anyone really wants to read that. All right, the end. Bye bye.